I did an undergraduate degree in science. I was really keen on environmental issues. I was really keen to work as an ecologist and or environmental scientist, but increasingly got frustrated with the lack of action. I guess that sort of got me anxious. And so I travelled a lot also around that time. I decided to go back to study and combine a couple of passions. One was obviously a passion for environmental issues, and the other one was for travel. I needed to do a research project to encourage people that were diving on the Barrier Reef to behave in particular ways around minke whales. Now, it's not legal to swim with whales, but if you're scuba diving and they approach you, it's pretty hard to get away from them. So my job really was to go out on these boats and test some different ways of communicating with people to try and get them to follow these guidelines of how to behave around whales. And I guess what I was able to see then was the first, I guess, glimmer of or insights into what worked and what didn't to change behaviour. And it actually sort of caught me a little bit as a bug. After that, I came to Melbourne and I started working at the zoo and got much more interested in behaviour change there. We were doing some work on frogs. There was an endangered species. We wanted to protect a particular pond which that frog was breeding in from development, and we were unsuccessful. And I really realised at that moment that conservation and protecting things I cared about was much more about people than it was about the science that underpinned it. That led me to take on to do a second master's degree. It was around behaviour change and tourism, and that master's degree looked at profound experiences that people had had with wildlife. And the reason I sort of focused on that was because I thought if people had these kind of amazing experiences with wildlife, it would set them on a different path, where they would, make better decisions around trying to protect wildlife. And indeed, that's what I found. At that point, I then had the opportunity to do a PhD, squarely looking at how do we change the behaviour of people who visit the zoos in order to make more sustainable, more pro-wildlife decisions. We did lots of fun experiments, lots of fun interventions around the country to try and get better outcomes. About 2/3 of the way through that, I presented at a conference just after the presentation by John Thwaites. And he saw my presentation and he caught up with me afterwards and said, "We're thinking about starting a behavioural unit. Would you be interested in coming over and helping set that up?" And in 2009, maybe 2010, I guess we first formed the Behaviour Change Initiative. We changed the name about 6 months in. The decision to change the name was really around the success of ClimateWorks and their name, and we liked their name, and we thought, well, let's just pinch half of it. And so, yeah, we officially became BehaviourWorks, I think, in 2011, and have been growing and operating ever since. So when the Behavioural Insights Unit, the UK one, or the Behavioural Insights team as they're known now, was set up, one of the criticisms a lot of people had of them was that they were sort of putting band-aids on pretty major problems. And in some ways behaviour change is a bit of a cop-out. It's like, well, we've got this really big systemic or societal issue. We'll just get, like, say, obesity. We'll just run some experiments and try and get people to make healthier choices, like, choosing nuts instead of a chocolate bar at a supermarket or something like that. But the reality is that really doesn't change. The world is still getting more and more obese, and so those criticisms are very real, and they're also sort of coupled with them is this criticism that governments sort of turn to behavioural researchers and applied behavioural science as an alternative to doing the hard stuff in regulation, which says, actually, you can't sell those chocolate bars to those kids, or you can't have, which is the hard stuff. So there's these criticisms around behavioural science that it's a bit of a band-aid, particularly when we play in some big spaces like, serious and significant systemic societal issues. So I think the challenge for behavioural science is to address that. So instead of getting people to, for example, choose the nut bar instead of the chocolate bar at the supermarket, we will ask them to lobby for regulation to ensure that the chocolate bars aren't for sale or that they're put somewhere that's harder to find. So that's kind of one way of thinking about how behavioural science can help sort of think bigger picture and think how do we address global, more systemic issues. There are other ways. I think, we can think about spillover more, which is one behaviour leading to another, to another, to another. So we can take people on journeys that might start with choosing the nut bar, but ends with them lobbying government. And I think perhaps the third way that behavioural science can think more systemically is around using behavioural science as a bit of a litmus test to see where systems push back. We might try and get a behaviour change, and we might get, say, 20% of people doing what we want to do and 80% of people not doing what we want to do. But I think the thinking needs to flip. So we say 80% of people didn't do it. Why not? And so we need to explore the barriers that they've faced around in the system that have prevented them doing what we wanted them to do. Perhaps even a better example might be something like getting an appliance repaired rather than replacing it. Is it not the availability of service providers or of parts, or is it too expensive? Like, try and unpack it so that we understand the barriers, the systemic barriers to change. So I think that's some thinking that we need to develop and use it more as a diagnostic to work out why this system doesn't allow behaviours to happen, rather than how we can use behavioural science to tweak it to get to behaviours to happen, if that makes sense.